members of the faculty and student body, the political union is presenting Mr. Rockwell for the same reason that it presents all speakers. That is, an attempt to give students first-hand information about the political and social issues in America today. The political union, like the Board of Regents, feels that free inquiry is essential to education, and that as citizens of a democracy, we students have the right and obligation to inform ourselves about the widest possible variety of opinions. The presentation of any speaker by the political union does not signify that the executive board or any member of the executive board necessarily endorses that speaker's opinions. All programs are presented simply in the interest of education. A few words about Mr. Rockwell. He was born March 9, 1918 in Bloomington, Illinois, and he went to school in Maine and then attended Brown University. He left Brown in the middle of his junior year and joined the Navy, where he eventually rose to rank of commander. He fought in the Atlantic, the Pacific, in Africa, Guadalcanal, Guam, as a fighter and seaplane pilot. He commanded 3 Navy squadrons, won 9 decorations, and later established the largest advertising agency in Maine. Mr. Rockwell was a conservative for 8 years and set up the United States Nazi Party in 1958. Mr. Rockwell will speak for approximately 45 minutes, and a 30-minute question and answer session will follow. All questions will be written and will be collected by the ushers. At 1:20, there will be about a 2-minute pause so that those of you with classes who desire to leave will have the opportunity to do so. Without further ado, then, let me present to you George Lincoln Rockwell, the head of the American Nazi Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruvelis. And let me say to the students and the faculty of the university and the other officials that I am most grateful for this opportunity to speak to you. I am here to present ideas for your judgment, not to agitate, and I will not abuse the privilege which has been granted me. In the streets, you've all heard, of course, of some of our activities in the streets when we get involved in fights and so forth. This is agitation. I am not here to agitate. As I said, I'm here to present ideas. You see no evidence of any agitation here, and there will be none. I don't expect that I'm going to be able to convert anybody here in a matter of 45 minutes. I don't expect anybody is going to come up here and ask for an armband after I'm finished speaking. You cannot cram in 45 minutes what took me about 25 years to find out. About all I can do, ladies and gentlemen and students, is to try to present to you some of the reasons why I left Brown University in 1940 to go fight Adolf Hitler, because I wanted to protect my country from a man I thought was a monster, and now brings me before you as the head of the U.S. Nazi Party. I can hope to give you a peek at some of the ideas, some of the changes that occurred, and my hope is that, as I once did, you will examine the same resource material which I will give you, and that you perhaps will find out what I think you should find out that you don't know. I believe that our country is the victim of managed news. Not a little bit of it, not about military affairs. I believe all our news is managed. As an example of that, I will tell you something that occurred to me just yesterday. A man named Emmett Watson of the Seattle Post-Intelligencer asked me for an interview, and he was kind enough to feed me a lunch and tell me that in the paper this morning there was going to be a big interview telling what I said. And I noticed this morning there is nothing in the paper. I noticed that the paper has played this down and will continue to do so. This is a very small example of what I am going to show you becomes vicious in many cases. I'm not saying they have not the right to leave things out or put in what they want. I'm only saying that this is what I have seen happen dozens of times. Things are manipulated and maneuvered, not with regard to what the public interest is, but what somebody else's interest is, which I think is wrong. There is a science in our country that is called engineered opinion. I worked on Madison Avenue with the advertising agencies when I was attending Pratt Institute in New York and becoming a commercial artist. And I found out that they are able to manage the minds and the hearts of people to get them to want things that they never had any desire for. All sorts of things, from cigarettes to deodorants and all sorts of other things. It's called missionary work. And it's done by convincing you that you need something that you never even thought of before. And it's very effective. It sells millions of dollars worth of products. It also, ladies and gentlemen, sells political ideas and political candidates. Now, in a democracy, in a republic, which we are supposed to have here, it is impossible for people. I don't think there's going to be any difficulty here, ladies and gentlemen. They're outside and we're in here. And if they do come in, I'm used to that too. Now, no machine, let alone a human being, even a computer, is unable to reach valid conclusions. A computer comes out with only the kind of answers that you put in. And if you put in false information, the computer will give you false answers. Surely nobody can quarrel with that. My claim, ladies and gentlemen, is that you students here and our American people are being denied information. And they're being denied it consciously, purposefully, and for a specific purpose, which I think is bad. Now, I have some documents to prove it. You can't see the documents, but I will be... Well, let me say, in case anybody thinks that this is a fake and I'm waving around, Mr. Ruvelis is here and the dean is here to check them, but further than that, any statement I make here today, any document I have, I will be happy to show it to any committee that's properly authorized to look at it, and I'll go further than that. If there's anybody here that thinks that I am lying about a single matter, he is welcome to stand up in debate in an authorized manner at a time to be set by the authorities, and I'll debate him. And if he can beat me, well, let me finish. If he can beat me in debate and show that I have lied about one fact, I will go to work for the B'nai B'rith for nothing. Now, this document that I have here, ladies and gentlemen, is a photostat of a letter from the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, which recently made some noises about me coming here. And this letter from the B'nai B'rith is to the publishers of America. It tells that it's an open letter to these various publishers. Let me read you a paragraph of this letter from the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith. We are interested in stifling the sale of this book. It's a book on racism. We believe that this can best be accomplished by refusing to be stampeded into giving it publicity. Every review or public criticism of a book of this character brings it to the attention of many who would otherwise know nothing of it. The results is added sales, and it goes on and on to tell how to stifle, that's the word the Anti-Defamation League, how to stifle the sale of this book, which was a book by Madison Grant. I have written a book. Whether it's good or bad is not in the question at the moment. I am telling you that my book, you cannot buy it in any bookstore, because bookstore after bookstore has been told if they stock my book, they can't have other books to sell. I take it those are the book burners applauding, those who believe that books should be stifled. Well, I'm glad to know which ones you are that approve of that sort of thing. Here's a piece of information which I think you ought to know, pertaining to one of the most important matters in the United States. The President of the United States was shot by a communist. And within 3 days after he was shot by a communist, the communist worker in New York said, we have got to stop all these inquiries by Senator Eastland in the state of Texas. Chief Justice Warren should set up a commission and investigate it. That was in the November 26th issue of The Worker. And 3 days later, the President of the United States appointed exactly that commission. And I say to you that the reason is because this sort of information they don't want out. Here is a report published by Congress in which the testimony, sworn testimony, shows Jack Rubenstein, a member of the Young Communist League and a member of the Communist Party, among a lot of other people. This is some of the documents. Have you even heard it? Maybe it's wrong, but have you even been told there's such a possibility? I say you haven't. Here is a document put out by the American Jewish Committee. 8 long pages. How to stop Lincoln Rockwell from getting publicity. Well, now, Now, I can see how there are many of you that might think, well, that's a laudable thing, but if somebody can stop me from getting publicity, ladies and gentlemen, and having a chance to speak, then they can stop you. If in our country any group of people can decide who they're going to cut out of the public opinion network in this country, then they can cut anybody out. This is my point. This book here is marked at the top not for publication. It's a hard thing to get. I had to do a little sneaking and snooping around to get this thing. And I tell you, it is a vile document. It tells how to block an American from the minds of the public so that you can't judge what I have to say. Yes, sir. I have been asked to announce that I am perfectly willing to repeat my speech for the crowd outside who cannot get in if this is desired, and I will do so if the authorities ask me to do so, and only if they do. What I have tried to show you, ladies and gentlemen, is that you cannot possibly make intelligent judgments in your democracy if you are denied information. Whether that information is popular or unpopular is not the question. It is, do you have all the information? If you are denied some of the information by people like who applauded that my book is not for sale, then you can't make an intelligent judgment. You don't know what you're thinking. The output of your minds is based on wrong input, on faulty and partial input, and I say that this is wrong. In World War II, I had charge of amphibious invasions, or parts of them. One of the first things we were taught that whenever you invade an enemy country, the first thing you seize after the armed forces is communications. The first thing you must get control of is communications, because if the enemy controls communications, you cannot hold that people in subordination. They will get loose because the enemy can agitate them, they can lie to them, or the enemy can get them together. You have got to seize communication. Now, let me tell you just one situation here in our country. I haven't got time, I've only got 45 minutes. I can give you only one example in one field. I could go into movies, books, magazines, newspapers, but let's take TV. The most potent propaganda weapon in the history of the world, in my opinion, is TV. It's a tremendously powerful weapon. Let me tell you that you only have 3 networks, just 3. Everything that comes over that idiot tube comes from one of these 3 networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS. That's all you have. Now let me tell you who are the heads of these organizations. Now remember, I'm not making any implications. I'm merely pointing out that when you invade a country, you capture the communications. You make the implication and you think what this means. The head of CBS is a man named William Paley. His real name is Palinsky. William Palinsky. He's a Russian Jew. The head of NBC, as you all know, we don't have to give his other name. He uses his right name, is Robert Sarnoff, a Russian Jew. And the head of ABC is Leonard Goldenson, another Russian Jew. Now, suppose all the people that own the television, suppose all the people that are running the television were all Italian. You would never see an Italian criminal, would you? Instead of that, on the TV, you see almost all Italian criminals. In fact, they had to complain when they had the Untouchable show. There were so many Italians. Have you ever seen a Jewish criminal or a Negro criminal? I haven't. In fact, I was treated to the sight of Sammy Davis Jr. in one show as the fastest gun in the West, with the white men all diving under porches trying to get away from this terrible, dangerous... You know what would have happened to a Negro who showed up with a gun on right here in Washington about 100 years ago? This is the kind of thing they're putting on the TV because one group has control of your TV. And you cannot possibly make intelligent judgments as long as that one group is feeding you only what they want. What you have only thing that you have heard. The result, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is a situation developed in the history of the world which I do not believe has ever existed before. Never before. In Rome and in many civilizations which have perished, the people themselves have become decadent, degenerate, and rotten, and they have perished because they were rotten inside. I do not believe our country and Western Christian civilization is rotten, but it is dying. And all over the world, the barbarians are making fun of us for it. This is the truth. Everywhere you go, the so-called barbarians are laughing at us. Many people do not know this, but the Negro civil rights groups call us the Romans. And they call themselves the barbarians, and it's true. We are decadent, soft, and weak. But I don't think that it is a natural development. I think we are being poisoned. I think we are being forced into degeneracy and weakness by the press, the TV, the radio, a constant dose of false information. An example, ladies and gentlemen, I want to show you something which I consider to be the most disgusting thing in our country today. Now, there's always a lot of giggling when I mention this, but it's true. Did you know in Washington, D.C., at this very moment, there is an office and a lobby for the queers of America, and they're trying to get rid of us? Thank you, queers. I'm glad to know that some of you here. I said I wouldn't offend anybody, and I'm going to try not to, but I'm going to have to blank. The queers are out as far as I'm concerned. Here is a document they put out. They claim they want their rights. They're being discriminated against. And I must admit, I'm for discriminating against queers. Here is toleration of the most decadent and degenerate failing of any civilization. Every civilization that has dropped and had a catastrophe has always begun to promote queerism. In Rome, in Greece, this was a standard facet of the dying civilization. That is only one facet of it, however. We are also being taught, you are being taught, and I was at Brown University, they taught me that it's naughty, it's bad to fight anytime. You mustn't fight. You must turn the other cheek. You must be a peace creep and march up and down in front of the White House with a peace button. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how decadent our society has become, and people they're not even astounded at it anymore. They think it's funny, and you probably think it's funny too. In Baltimore, they've got an ape in the Baltimore Zoo that's earned $8,000 as a painter of fine art. They've hung his paintings up. People are paying money for the paintings of an ape. Now, what kind of a civilization is it in which the art is in competition with monkeys? Well, I began to examine this kind of art. I might mention I took first prize in the United States for commercial art in 1948. From the New York Society of Illustrators, so I know a little something about art. Commercially, I was paid for it. I began to examine who was behind this kind of art that they were trying to teach me at Pratt Institute, this crazy painting. And you know what I discovered? Who was the originator, not the originator perhaps, but the spiritual father of this crazy painting is a man named Picasso. And Picasso is supposed to be a Spaniard, as you may know. He designed this peace dove for Moscow. He's a communist, as I'm sure most of you know. But what I didn't know is that he's Jewish. Then I remember all my life since I've been a kid practically, I've been appalled at what they call poetry. They take any kind of trash and spread it around on a page somehow in pretty little spots, and they call it poetry. Recently, or about 5 years ago, two gentlemen in Australia took the Australian Army Manual for the Control of Mosquitoes, and they took every fifth word and spread it around on a page and sent it into the International Poetry Contest, and ladies and gentlemen, they won first prize. Then I go to the Museum of Modern Art, and you go around to any museum and you look at what they call modern sculpture, and it looks like something they shoveled up out of a cow pasture, all these little round lumps. And who do I discover is the mastermind of this? Jacob Epstein. Who is the mastermind of this poetry that I told you about? This poetry that take the words and all. Remember, a rose is a rose is a rose. Her name was Gertrude Stein. Finally, let's get to the subject which is probably closest to the hearts of most liberals, the matter of race. We're told day in and day out that science has proved over and over again that all races are equal. We're all the same. Well, do you know where that began? It's admitted that the guy that began that is a man named Franz Boas at Columbia University. He was the first anthropologist to really start pushing that strongly. Well, you say, well, what's that got to do? Well, here's Franz Boas in a publication called The Jewish Communist. I got this out of the Library of Congress. And here's his picture. He's sending a telegram of congratulations to Stalin, and he too is Jewish. Then after Mr. Boas, there came two more. Gene Weltfish. I'm sure you've read some of the books published by this great anthropologist. Another person in communist activity and also Jewish. And finally this Ashley Montague. Jewish, pro-communist, three of them in a row. These are the people that have told you we're all equal. The result, ladies and gentlemen, is that I believe, unlike Rome, a vigorous and healthy people who only 100 years ago we ran the Indians off of here by force and violence, however you want to rationalize it, that's what we did. We took this country away from them and established civilization. If we had had a liberal government such as we had now, we'd still be over there in Boston. That's as far as we could have gone, because you couldn't do one single thing that we did here to win the West if you had been a liberal. But luckily we didn't have liberal governments when this country was growing. Only when we're dying and collapsing do we have liberal governments. The result, ladies and gentlemen, is that we are facing a form of suicide. We do not examine facts anymore. We are acting like a mob. In most cases, people go for whatever they're told. People don't evaluate what's in the newspaper. They don't evaluate what's not in the newspaper, which is even more important. As a result, we have the decline of the West, as Spengler predicted. I disagree with Mr. Spengler in this respect. I think that Western civilization is not declining yet. I think it is being poisoned and pushed down, while Eastern civilization, colored civilization, is rising. There are 7 dark people on this earth for every white person. For every one of you that's white, there are 7 dark people. And if you're going to have a world democracy, you're going to be outvoted 1-7. And this is exactly what the UN is doing. Well, I'd like to take the applauders one by one by the hand and take them for a walk through their nation's capital tonight at 11 o'clock, over through the entire capital. And if they came out at the other end at 5 o'clock in the morning at all, they'd be all finished being liberals. You should see what's going on in your nation's capital with your equals. Now, a civilization rises, ladies and gentlemen. Our own civilization right here in America did not rise by liberal ideas. It rose through the soldierly virtues of courage, integrity, honor, courage, fighting, guts, or whatever you want to call it. It rose through manly, masculine virtues. It never rose by turning the other cheek. And all the hissing and giggling in the world won't change the facts. Either it did or it did not. If I'm wrong, then let somebody stand up like a man and debate me and prove. In fact, I've been asked to speak here for a second time. How about making a debate of it? If there's any professor or any person here that will stand up and disprove my facts, send me to work for the B'nai B'rith. Let's see on the second turn around here. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, a civilization rises when its people are Spartan, when they're not luxury-loving, when they're willing to stand up and fight and die for something they believe in, not when they're pacifists, not when they're equalists, not when they say all Indians are equal. It's when they say, let's get those Indians on a reservation. That's when we made out. In other words, what causes the declines of civilization is the opposite of what builds them up. It's fight, human courage, soldierly virtues that builds up a civilization, combined with ideals. And what destroys them is the lack of ideals and the beginning of the loving of luxury, cowardice, and degeneracy. And I'm sorry and ashamed to say that all over our country today this is going on. In fact, in Hollywood, you go down to Hollywood today and walk along Hollywood Boulevard, and you can't tell the girls from the boys. And if one of the boys grabs hold of you and you paste him in the mouth, it's a felony and they send you to prison for it. They're protecting these pansies. This is how degenerate our country's gotten. All over this world, ladies and gentlemen, are people who call themselves communists, but there are 2 kinds. And Russia is finding this out. The communist world is splitting. Most of the right wing is preaching that the supposed fight between Mao Zedong in China and Russia is phony. I tell you, it is not phony. Communism is splitting wide open. I predicted it 6 years ago, and it's coming. And here's the way it's splitting, just the way our country is splitting. It's splitting by race. And this was confirmed in France recently when de Gaulle recognized China by the Russian representative saying to France, quote, and this was in Newsweek, "Do the French not realize that Mao Zedong is trying to arise all the colored people of China and Africa and India against the white people regardless of politics?" This is what's going on in the world. And communism, as well as democracy and every other form of idea, is being split by race. China is leading the dark bloc of communists, and they're not half as concerned with communism as they are with race. And meanwhile, they're telling you people that you must not be concerned with race, that it's evil and wicked. And as a result, you're divided into a million little competing, squabbling groups, and we're enormously, pitifully, tragically weak. We cannot stand up to this enormous block of dark people led by communism as long as we are absolutely not only unconscious of our race, but ashamed of it. Now, this is going on in the world right today, and you're not going to get rid of it by giggling or hissing. It's going on. The Soviet representatives see it, and I think it goes so far. I predict the day may come when we and the communists will forget the words capitalism and communism and ideology of all sorts, and we will stand shoulder to shoulder to defend ourselves from millions and billions of colored people who are rising up all over the world in what they call nationalism for uhuru. Now, who is leading this? This is the sort of thing that I think has been blacked out. I am going to give you an example which will shock you. I don't care what you react here in the audience. When you get outside privately today, you will be shocked by what I'm going to show you and tell you and back up. Here is a paper that I put out of a reproduction gotten from the Library of Congress. I'll give you the exact quote and where you can get it here. It's from the London Illustrated Sunday Herald, February 8, 1920. Those of you who think that I'm just up waving papers in the air here, write it down and go look it up in your library. Well, like I did, that's where I got it. This is an article by Winston Churchill, and he calls it Zionism versus Bolshevism, the struggle for the soul of the Jewish people. And in the two middle paragraphs here, I won't take time to read them all, you can do it yourself. He says the Russian Revolution was not a revolution by Russians, it was the capture of Russia by Jewish people, from Jewish criminals from all over. That's Winston Churchill, not Rockwell. That's on this paper, it's in your library. Now, you can't hiss or giggle that out of it. That's a truth, that's a fact. Here are documents from the United States Archives, right across the river from me in Arlington, 3 of them. And I'll tell you where you can get them. I'll quote you the exact place where they're from here. Record Group 120, Records of the American Expeditionary Force, June 9, 1919. The United States Archives Building, Washington, D.C. They're signed and sealed with a ribbon of the United States. In here you will find the United States intelligence officers reporting that the Russian Revolution was being led and run by Jews from New York City. Trotsky's name was Bronstein, and he was a tailor on the Lower East Side of New York City. That's the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Litvinov's name, well, you hear this one. You think that was funny. Litvinov's real name was Finkelstein. Here is a report from the British ambassador. This is a report by the ambassador from Great Britain to Russia to all governments, including Britain, in which he says I could read it all again, but I'm not going to take time. You can do it for yourself. Printed by Her Majesty's Stationery Office, in which the man says the Russian Revolution is a Jewish capture of the Russian people. That's the truth. I'm telling you the truth. You have been. This is what changed me. You say, how could you possibly be a Nazi? I used to be as you. I was a college boy at Brown. And I was almost a liberal. Not quite, but I almost made it. I was a little too conservative for all of that stuff. I just couldn't quite get Roosevelt down. But I thought just as you did, and I left Brown University to go fight Hitler because I didn't know this. And I probably would have giggled as you did when somebody told me. I couldn't believe it. It's just too big to imagine. But it's true. And if it's true, think about this. If what I've showed you is true, how come you never heard it before? Think of that, ladies and gentlemen. You have been completely blacked out of one of the biggest historical facts in the history of the world. Never before did the Jewish people ever capture a great big country. And they captured Russia, Soviet Russia, and turned it into a Bolshevik state which is now conquering the world. Boast they're going to bury you. Well, you say that's only in Russia. Even if that's true, what's that got to do with us? Well, since I got back from World War II, ladies and gentlemen, since I got back from World War II, there have been 18 people convicted of treason on behalf of the Soviet Union. And of the 18, 16 of them have been atheist Jews. Remember Julius Rosenberg, Ethel Rosenberg, David Greenglass, Al Roth, Harry Gold, Morton Sobel, Robert Soblin, who, by the way, ran to Israel when I was over in England 2 years ago, Miriam Moskowitz, Weinbaum, Jack Sobel, Judy Copland, Nathan Gregory Silvermaster, Harry Dexter White. I could go on, and almost every one of them right down the line. Jewish atheists, not religious Jews, by the way. I am not here criticizing religious Jews. You cannot be a religious Jew and be a communist, because communists are atheists. Then you pick up a copy of the Daily Worker, and the atmosphere, ladies and gentlemen, if you pick it up, is kosher. Whether you care to admit it or you've probably never seen it. The manager is Louis Weinstock. Until recently, the editor was a man supposed to be Gates. Well, I checked and discovered his name was Israel Regenstrief. One of their favorite writers is Mike Newberry. I just discovered his name is Sidney Stein. One of the big backers of the Communist Worker, a paper that comes out called I.F. Stone's Weekly. Well, I find out the I.F. Stone is a cute little way of saying Feinstein. That's his name. It goes on and on. Will you say, well, yeah, but they're persecuting Jews in Russia. Baloney. What they're doing, they found out that us anti-Semites were having too much fun pointing to the communist Jewish leaders, so they put them down one notch. In the Soviet Union now, I bet there's not 5 people here who could tell me the name of the deputy premier, the number 2 man. His name is Dimshitz, and he's a Jew. Over here in this country, you have a racial situation in which the Negroes, I believe, are good people. They deserve a break. They've been persecuted. I agree to all of this. But they are being foully used and exploited as a political voting bloc, again, by the same group. The head of the NAACP is not the man that you're usually led to believe, Roy Wilkins. The president of it is Arthur Spingarn, a New York Jew. The man who puts the Negroes into the schools is a lawyer for the NAACP, Mr. Greenberg, if you remember. Kivy Kaplan is the chairman of the membership committee. The money came from Herbert Lehman. The Rosenwalds put in millions. And recently, 400,000 was just contributed, as I remember, by another one of these people. The only Negro that I know of in on the founding of the NAACP was W.E.B. Du Bois, who later turned communist, as you remember, and died in Ghana. And when I was at that march in Washington last August 28th, they had 10 minutes of silence for this communist, who was a member of the Communist Party in Ghana. What has happened, ladies and gentlemen, is that I believe our country has been peacefully conquered by a revolution, a Marxist, social democratic revolution. It has already taken place. We are not living under democracy because you are not getting free information. You are getting one-sided information, and you cannot make intelligent decisions. As a result, we have a situation in which one gang of fanatics, radicals, and revolutionaries are running our country, and what is the opposition? The John Birch Society. And what does the John Birch Society do? The John Birch Society says, why, our best friends...
Mr. Rockwell, you expounded to...
And our best friends are Negroes. We got Negro chapters. They're crazy about these people. Who is the leader of the opposition? A Jewish gentleman by the name of Goldwater. Who is the head of YAF? Who is the head of YAF? A lot of you probably don't know who actually runs it. It's Marvin Liebman, an ex-communist, a member of the Young Communist League at 79 Madison Avenue, who also has on his letterhead Douglas and Luce and a bunch of people who are anything but conservatives. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to switch to another tactic here, another part of my lecture, which is the tactics we're going to try to use to stop it. Why I am a Nazi instead of a conservative. For 8 years, I tried to be a conservative and be a nice guy. I didn't mention Jews. I didn't mention Negroes. I tried my best to stop this thing by being nice, like Mr. Welch, like Mr. Hargis and these people. And the result is we were blacked out. You cannot be heard. There is nothing in the papers about it. You never reach the minds of the people. And even more important, you don't reach their hearts. The right wing for 40 years has been making the same mistake, maybe even 50 years. Mostly it's reactionary. Conservatives that I knew, mostly they were concerned about taxes, the Constitution, a whole series of abstract ideas. They were not concerned with people. And what we're going to save in the long run or lose in this country is our people. And I love our people. I don't want to see anything happen to them. I don't want to see our republic going because I don't want to see anything happen to our people. It isn't love of the abstract ideas. It's the people that we are trying to set these ideas up to save. The right wing, I do not believe, realizes this. Those of you who may be conservatives, picture this situation. Imagine yourself going up to a miner in West Virginia who has 7 kids and he's hungry and he's out of a job and he's done everything he can to get a job. He's a good man. And you go up to him and say, do you realize taxes have gone up to 90% when you make $1 million? You realize that, young fellow? This is terrible. We've got to do something about this. We've got to stop taxes. We've got to enforce the Constitution and states' rights. What do you think the result is with this man? He doesn't care anything about that sort of thing. He's repulsed by what he has been told is callousness about people. But when President Johnson comes with his war on poverty and pats the little baby on the head and says, we're going to look out for you folks, he wins the hearts of those people. Those people don't examine Mr. Johnson's records any more than most of you do. They just say he's a good guy because he's concerned about these poor people. Well, I say it's about time that the right wing began to be concerned about people rather than money. That's the difference between a Nazi and a conservative. I'm interested in our white Christian people and seeing that they get help. Even more important, ladies and gentlemen, let's take the subject of tactics. How do you do this? I don't believe that we can win by illegal methods. I don't believe that we can beat this revolution that they've put peacefully over on us by unpeaceful means. I believe that we would be beaten the first 2 days if we tried a second civil war and that sort of foolishness. This is ridiculous. The Minutemen and that kind of garbage. It just won't work. It's foolish. The only way it can be done is legally. You have got to become the government of the United States in order to get the traitors out and start establishing policies which will look out for our good, common, ordinary white people and protect them from what they are being stuffed down their throats right now. Stuff like race mixing, which most of them don't want, no matter how you feel. In order to win legally, ladies and gentlemen, you must win the masses of people. You do not win a political victory by winning right-wingers, old ladies, old folks, or stuffy old people, the old ladies in sneakers that they always talk about. You don't win a political revolution by winning the DAR. You win a political revolution by winning millions and millions of people in labor, youth, the masses of people, and that's the difference between the American Nazi Party and the rest of the conservatives. The rest of the conservatives are like a bunch of chickens fighting over feed in the chicken yard. They fight over the same little bunch of people, and they trade them all back and forth and hand each other literature. And I say to you, it's about time we bust it out of the circle and start reaching people, and I'm doing it here, right here today. I'm doing it all over this country. When I'm out in the streets, I'm always talking to hostile audiences. I don't go to right-wing rallies and tell the people, we're going to save this country. I'm out here in front of you people booing and hissing and giving me a hard time because I want to win you good people. I'm not concerned with winning the people we already have. I want to do the best I can with the people that we've got to win. And to do that, ladies and gentlemen, you need a technique which the left wing knows, and I don't think the right wing ever even heard of. It's called mass emotional engineering. And I didn't understand it until I got hold of this book. This is not a right-wing book. It's not a political book. It's a book on psychology. And I highly recommend that all of you read it, especially the conservatives. It's by William Sargent, a British psychologist. And in this book, Mr. William Sargent opened my eyes for the first time to the techniques of mass conversion, how you change people from one feeling, not idea, but from one feeling to another entirely. And it's never done, ladies and gentlemen, never done by facts. The right wing never tires of repeating, the truth shall make you free. And the right wing is always going around with their little fact sheets and saying, look at this here, see this? See all this? Look at the statistics. And nobody cares. You go to a right-wing meeting and it's so dull you go to sleep. It's boring. Who cares about all those statistics? When you want to make somebody a fanatic devotee of your cause, you got to reach their heart. And you don't reach hearts with statistics. Never. You reach hearts with emotion, with feeling, with excitement. Now this leads me up to a little bit of explanation of what's in this book for those of you who don't already know. Mr. Sargent starts off with the question, how did John Wesley, the Methodist preacher who started in England, how did he convert thousands of people in a matter of moments to the most fanatic method? He got Methodism started. Now let me tell you, these are all, I'm not preaching Nazism or right-wingism. These are scientific facts which you can check in your own library. I'm sure this book is in your library. It's called Battle for the Mind by William Sargent. Get it out of the... Well, let me say... If he turns out to be a Jew, I'm going to offer him a party card. Here is what he found out, ladies and gentlemen, when Mr. Sargent examined the records and the diaries of Mr. Wesley. He discovered that Mr. Wesley preached, you've got to instill guilt, tremendous feelings of guilt, until the person passes the threshold of what he can accept, and he passes out. Now you say, how could a person pass out at preaching? Hundreds of them did. When John Wesley preached, they were passing out all over the place. And when they woke up, they were Methodists. It's in here. Let me give you a more dramatic example. There was a lady, graduate student at Columbia University. You'll find the story of this lady in the book. The lady discovered she was doing a graduate thesis on voodooism in Haiti. And she decided that she would go down there and do a little lab work and see what voodooism was and actually test it on the ground. And when she got down there, she decided the best way to do it was to get right in the thing and get into a voodoo dance in the spirit of it. And the way she writes about it is one of the most moving descriptions I've ever read. She describes how she gets into the voodoo dance and plants one foot after the other, and the drums are thumping and thumping and thumping. And she dances around and around that fire with these people chanting and chanting and chanting and thumping and thumping. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, she passed out. She went into a coma, and when she woke up, she became a voodoo priestess, where she is now in Haiti. This is the power of mass conversion. Now, this has nothing to do with facts. This has to do with an emotional engineering technique. She had had an experience. In churches, they call it a religious experience. In lysergenic acid parties, they call it a drug experience. It doesn't matter whether it's imposed by emotion, by drugs, or by religion. The effect is to make you suggestible. And when you're in that emotional state, you are helpless to resist a suggestion. And that's what's happened to you people. This is what's happened to our country. That's what happened to me at Brown. They get you suggestible in front of the boob tube there at a TV, and you're looking at the thing. And when you're all wrapped up in some story, they plant a little idea in your mind, and they keep it up. And while you're suggestible, you get taken. This is what's happened to you. This is what happened to me. And the only way you can resist it, one of the things in this book that's valuable for those of you who plan a criminal career, it tells in here how to resist the cops. I've had a lot of experience with police. And as long as they're on the level and don't violate the law, I've never had any difficulty. But once in a while, especially in the South, you'll get into a situation where they try to push you around. And when they ever try to get you to confess something you didn't do, they have a good guy and a bad guy technique. They have two cops. One of them is mean, and the other one seems to be nice. And finally, the mean guy gets up and goes out, and the other nice guy says, gee, I'm sorry, my pal is such a louse here, we can't do anything with him. And you get talking to the nice guy and give everything they want to him. This man here tells you how to resist that sort of technique, but even more important, he tells you how to resist efforts to make you think what you don't want to think. Brainwashing. And the technique of brainwashing is the first thing you've got to understand before you can understand it, before you can resist it, rather. In order to resist brainwashing, you've got to understand that the way it works is to debilitate, confuse, and above all, establish feelings of guilt. 2 more minutes. You've got to establish feelings of guilt, and this is what they have done to you liberals. They have got you feeling guilty about what we've done to the Negro. Now, I agree what we've done to the Negro is wrong. But you shouldn't feel guilty about it to the point where you want to do something to somebody else about it. You should try to relieve the situation without hurting other people. But that is not what the manipulators want. They want to destroy the order in our society, and they're using your guilt to do it. Now, I maintain that the right wing has got to understand this emotional engineering, and I use the swastika purposely because here's what I found. When people come to hear a conservative, usually they're blasé, they're calm, they're not interested. When they come to see me, they either come to see me get killed, thrown in jail, or they come to see the excitement, but in any case, they're emotional. They're all stirred up. When they come to see a conservative, they're bored. When they come to see me, I see to it that they're emotional and excited. And when you're emotional, here's what I found out. You say, yes, but they hate you because of the swastika. Maybe so. But when I'm out in the streets, here's what I've discovered and what you'll find in this book. Emotional states are interchangeable. When you get somebody mad enough, you can change it to hatred, you can change it to love, or you can take love and change it to anger. You can move and manipulate emotional states almost anywhere you want, and I do it all the time in the streets. I can do it at college audiences. I'm not here to agitate, but if I wanted to really get going here and wound up, I could get you spellbound and move you in spite of yourselves. But I'm not here to do that, and I'm not going to do it. In short, ladies and gentlemen, I say this. Our country, our Western Christian civilization, our republic, and our Constitution are going down the drain because other people are using emotional engineering. They're using radical revolutionary tactics. We of the American Nazi Party say we are going to protect this republic, this Constitution, and this country no matter what we have to do. And the main thing we're going to do is win back our masses of people with emotional engineering techniques, and that's what we're doing. I thank you very much, and I will answer questions now. Hadn't we better wait until the people that are going to leave have left?
Right, it's about that time. Anyone that has a class that they should be at, feel free to leave.
Boy, that was a real...
Right. With those of you with questions, please hold them. An usher will collect them from you. Don't walk up here. See, we have a very limited amount of time, and the quicker we can settle down, the faster we can get this moving.
I think you might as well go ahead, Mr. Revelis.
The first question, Mr. Rockwell, would you please give us your definition of the white race and tell us how many people in this audience would be included?
Well, I don't even know how many people there are in the audience in the first place. I would have no way of knowing how many people are in the white race. I will only say that I do not believe in what they often say in the papers in this word Aryan. I don't find it scientific. I don't think there's any way that you could possibly make a grouping that would stick with the word Aryan. I do, however, think that the United States government and a lot of other organizations use the classification Caucasian. And this, I believe, will fit. It fits Jewish people, it fits Italian people, it fits people of all extractions so long as they're white. And that's the best way I can answer it, the same way the statistical studies do.
Mr. Rockwell, suppose for the moment your party was in power with you as its leader. What specifically would be your immediate as well as your long-range plans for the American Jews?
Jews who are not in any way participating in the communist program of treason to this country, I have nothing but respect for. I don't want to hurt them, and I will see that they're protected. I believe in the Constitution and in their rights, even to criticize me to the limit which is allowed in the Constitution, which is free speech. Jews who are engaged in the communist conspiracy and can be proved before a jury to have been making war on the United States or aiding and abetting the enemies of the United States, as the Rosenbergs were, will be gassed.
Mr. Rockwell, how do you distinguish between religious Jews and atheist Jews?
Well, I would say offhand that a man who announces he's an atheist and a communist, like Julius Rosenberg, who was fried at Sing Sing for being a communist spy, this is an atheist Jew. A man who wears one of those little black beanies and is a religious Jew, I would say he's a religious Jew. They classify themselves.
Mr. Rockwell, was Hitler right in his gas cure for 6 million Jews? How should we solve this Jewish problem in this country?
This is precisely like asking, have you stopped beating your wife? No matter how I answer that question, I'm wrong. First of all, you're saying Hitler gassed 6 million Jews, and do you believe in that? I do not believe that Hitler gassed 6 million Jews. Let me show you a document. This is only one of the many, many proofs that I could show you that convinced me that it's not true before I launched the party, because I would not want any part of hurting any innocent people, and I don't believe that the German government did this. Well, let me show you my facts first, and then you make your decision after you're not here, after you've thought about it, because everybody's in a holiday festive mood here. I used to be a writer. I used to be a writer for magazines. Yeah, they were cheap magazines. That's all I could get into in the early days. This one is a magazine published in New York, and I sat down and decided I would discover where these articles about the Nazis and how vile and cruel and vicious they were came from. So I sat down and I wrote an article of the biggest bunch of lies I could think of about how the Nazis took ladies and people and used them for human vivisection. And I sent it into this magazine here, and they published it. With a big thing, we hope that this will never happen again. If we publish this vile and evil story, let us see that it must never happen. It's the same phrase they use all the time. And at the top, they printed a bunch of pictures of the victims of my lies, the pictures I never saw. And the gas ovens down here, all illustrating my article, which I made up, which is all lies. I wrote it under the name of Master Sergeant Lou Corr. I have the check written out to George Lincoln Rockwell to prove that it's mine. And in this article, ladies and gentlemen, I wrote solid lies about the gassing of those Jews, and just like all the other stuff you've seen, they printed it and told you it's the truth. Now, I have plenty of other documents. The figures from the Jews themselves, the World Jewish Congress publishes figures every year of the world Jewish population. And I won't go into all the figures here. They're available. All right, I better give you the figures, because somebody will say that I'm trying to hide it. The World Almanac got the figures from the World Jewish Committee in 1938 and said there were 15,688,259 Jews in the world. In 1948, the New York Times, from the same source, says there were 15,600,000 Jews in the world. That's 10 years later. Now, if you add 6 million Jews to the 15,600 that they say existed in 48 after the liberation of the concentration camps, you come out with a figure of 21,000 Jews in a matter that have existed in the world in a matter of 10 years from 15,000 earlier. Now you figure it out. There were 15,000, there would have to be an increase of the world Jewish population of more than 9,000 in order to make that possible, which is about 50% of the world Jewish population in 10 years. Now, any of you who are students of ethnology and sociology, you tell me if it's possible, even for a race that is as vigorous and virile, let us say, as the Jews, if they did nothing else day and night but work on the project, they couldn't make that many Jews. Okay, Mr. Velas.
Mr. Rockwell, what is the annual expenditure of the American Nazi Party? Where do you get your financial support?
The annual expenditure of the Nazi Party for last year was less than $20,000 for the entire nation. We have almost no money. We operate mostly on old-fashioned Yankee ingenuity, guts, and drive, force, the thing that I tell you I believe makes civilizations. We simply don't have any funds. I get the money to travel around to the colleges from each individual college. I never get a fee. They pay me just the fare to get there, and that's all. We are very poor. Somebody cheer now. Come on. Let's have it.
Mr. Rockwell, what are your religious beliefs?
I am an agnostic. I believe that this is a Christian country. I believe this is a Christian country, and I believe in Christian ethics and the Christian idea, and I believe in mostly what Jesus Christ did. But I do not believe in the mythology of Christianity, and I'm an agnostic. I simply don't know is my answer to that.
Mr. Rockwell, if the Jews have captured Russia, why hasn't Russia founded a state Jewish religion?
The Jews that captured Russia, ladies and gentlemen, were atheist Jews. They don't believe in the Jewish religion any more than the Rosenbergs did. And they are persecuting any religion. They are after the Baptists, and they're after the Catholics, and they're after the Zionist Jews. They shoot them over there every once in a while.
Mr. Rockwell, since the Jews have such phenomenal success in gaining control of everything, has it occurred to you that perhaps they are the superior ethnic group?
Well, it may interest you to know that I get asked that question at every single college where I speak. I always answer that, and I always answer it the same, which is truthfully. I think that intellectually, I think the Jews are superior. I think that the average Jew is more intelligent, more incisive in his thinking, more precise in his thinking, and more vigorous in his thinking than the average Gentile. I know that if I were to sit on a desert island and had to have a conversationalist, I would prefer a Jew because they're smart. I believe they are superior in intelligence. Where I think the Jews are not superior, and what I think has caused them to be driven out of every country they've been in, is I think they lack ideals. I think that a Jewish businessman will resort to tricks and tactics that a Christian businessman will not do. And as a result, they force themselves into a position where they wind up getting hated, whatever you want to call it, scapegoating or whatever it is. I think the Jews fail in a moral sense in that their ideals are lacking. Not that they have none, but I think a lot of them lack enough ideals to be able to say, I don't want to make a profit if it's going to involve doing something which is not right. And there's plenty of Christians that'll do that too, but I think more Jews will do it. And as a result, I think the Jews, their brilliance fails because of their lack of morals.
Mr. Rockwell, you expound a theory which would send American Negroes back to Africa and would eliminate 80% of our American Jews. What do you propose that we do with the American Indian, the Japanese American, the Chinese American, and the Roman Catholic?
The answer to that, ladies and gentlemen, is the only thing I am trying to do is solve problems. I know of no Chinese problem. If there were a Chinese problem, I would try to think of an answer. There is a Negro problem, and there is a Jewish problem, and we have got to solve them. The Negro problem, I think, needs to be solved by giving justice to the Negro people, not by persecuting them or pushing them around, and also not by hurting or persecuting the white people like the Civil Rights Bill would do. I believe the only solution is what the black Muslims used to preach, separation, which is what George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, and Monroe, for whom Monrovia and Liberia was named, all of our early presidents believed in separation. I do too. I think we should take our billions of dollars that we're using for foreign aid and giving to communist countries and give that to our own Negro people to build them an industrialized nation in Africa of their own, not a jungle where you throw them over there to live on bananas and berries. I think they ought to have a decent land of their own where they can be like our forefathers were, pioneers, and build it up. And I think they will find satisfaction in their destiny there. The Jewish question is easily solved by trials of all traitors, not just Jews, but all people committing treason and gassing all of them, Alger Hiss included. So there is no problem with, as far as I'm concerned, with the whole Jewish people, because loyal Jews, I have no quarrel with them. And as far as the other people go, Italians and Irishmen and so on, they all fit into our society. As far as I know, they do not there is no Irish Anti-Defamation League, for instance. Only the Jews have professionals to make people love them.
Sir, you stated that we in America have managed news. Was not the news in Nazi Germany managed? So what alternative does Nazism give us?
The news in Germany was managed, and they had a dictatorship there. I do not believe in dictatorship. This is where I part company with Adolf Hitler. I think that the American constitutional republic, as established by our founding fathers, not as perverted into a Marxist social democracy, which is what we have now, I think that original republic is the ideal mean, the golden mean between the complete left of anarchy and the complete right of tyranny. And I think that under those conditions you can have free press. Under dictatorship, which Hitler, I think, possibly had to establish in Germany because of the chaos over there and the communist takeovers in many German states, he did not have a free press, and I don't believe in that.
Sir, since Jesus was a Jew, do you think Christianity was the first attempt at a Jewish world takeover?
Let me comment on that this way. There is a Jew by the name of Marcus Eli Ravage, a famous American writer. I don't know whether he's still alive, but he wrote for Harper's and wrote many famous articles. Marcus Eli Ravage wrote A Real Case Against the Jews for, I think it was Harper's Magazine. I have a copy of it. And Marcus Eli Ravage said precisely what this gentleman just asked in his question. He said that the Jews invented Christianity in order to weaken the Romans. Now this, if you believe in this sort of thing, why read the Jewish version? The American Civil Liberties Union tries to use me. They don't want to look as though they defend mostly communists, so they throw a little Nazi in the pot once in a while to make it look good. And I don't want to go to jail, and I don't ever have any money for a lawyer, so I use the ACLU. And it's been a question in the scales of who was using who. And I think that the answer is found in the fact that they won't defend me anymore.
On Guadalcanal and on other South Pacific islands, you fought alongside or led Negroes and Jews, some who gave their lives and or limbs for the very country of which you now choose to deprive them. Please comment.
I have repeatedly said over and over again, I have nothing against a loyal Jew or a loyal Negro. I don't know how I can make it any stronger. I don't want to hurt either one of them. I do not think that the Negro will fit in our society. Now, you people are mostly liberals. There's probably a few Goldwater sissies sprinkled in here. But I think you're mostly liberals, and you liberals are a hothouse variety of Americans. You don't exist in any real numbers. You're only found in the college zoos, so to speak, where they keep the liberals. If you get out in the streets, see, I used to go to college, and I remember the atmosphere. It's a little hothouse. It's a little private club, and you all reinforce each other's ideas. But if you go out, here's the way to do some research and find out what America's thinking. Get away from the college. Go down to where the working men go to a bar on a Saturday night, for instance, and go in there and sip ginger ale or one or two beers and wait until the working men who are tired after a week's work have had a couple of beers and begin to feel a little bit looser and like talking. And start talking to them about how they feel. In fact, just to bring things along now, I'm not going to insult anybody. Well, I better not say it anyway. Use gutter terms for racial minorities, let's put it that way. And you see what the result is in this bar where all these working men are. The masses of American people are sick and tired of Negroes and race mixing, and they want it stopped. That's the truth, whether you like it or not, and you're not going to change that. Therefore, I say to you that the only realistic thing to do is not keep trying to jam two peoples together that won't fit. You have got to separate them, give the Negroes a fair chance in their own place. I would prefer Africa. I've gone this far, and believe me, this hurts me in the South, what I'm about to say. I will go so far if I thought that there were no other alternative but integration or continued phony segregation, which is as phony as it could be, and every Negro knows that. If those were the only alternatives, and the other one, of course, is slaughter, which I think is coming up, I would even favor giving them a section of this country, if necessary, if that was the last resort, preferably New York City, Brooklyn, and places where their Jewish friends could enjoy them. And as for the Jews, I have already answered at great length. If a Jew is not involved in communism or any kind of treason to this country, I have nothing against him, and the Constitution should protect him.
Mr. Rockwell, how do you justify the beatings administered by members of your party to a large number of elderly, unarmed Jewish people in Los Angeles some 9 months ago?
I wish some of you people that believe that stuff could have been there. And see, I have been through these things. You see how many people are... I have no stormtroopers here with me at all. These things that you read about in the paper. Now, if suddenly this audience were to erupt into a mob and attack me, I have no doubt that it would be reported that I took a big club and beat a lot of poor little girls half to death. This is the sort of thing that you read in the newspapers. At the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, 2,000 people attacked 5 men. And I had exactly 5 men. That's all that were there. And these 5 men were attacked by 2,000. And you're going to tell me that they were beating people? I know what it's like to be in 2,000 people trying to kill you. I've been there. And you don't do any beating. You try to survive and stay on your feet. My men didn't. They were all bloodied and beaten. And so they show up pictures of a few Jews holding their heads, and you believe it. I saw 2,000 of my men up in Philadelphia try to picket Gus Hall, the communist leader. And again, thousands of Jewish war veterans attacked us, not Gus Hall and his gang, they attacked us. So the answer is, any of my men who ever attack anybody without being first attacked, I would throw him out in 2 minutes. I want no part of anybody that breaks the law or any kind of a bully.
Wasn't Hitler surrounded by a group of homosexuals? Weren't many of the party hierarchy queers?
What kind of a man has got that on his mind? I'd like to know who wrote that. I can only answer that people who attempt, I've tried my best to present some kind of ideas here to you, and to start calling names. I could call names too, and I'm not going to do it. I even wouldn't use the word technically a few minutes ago. If people are going to call me a queer and you think that this is a way to answer my arguments, well, I'll leave it up to the students to decide what kind of a thing that is.
What percentage of Jews are atheistic in your estimation?
I couldn't answer that. I have no way of telling what they believe. All I know is that there's a large percentage of Jews, much too large, that are mixed up in the communist conspiracy. I've given many of their names.
If you can't tell what they believe, then you gas them all, right?
Wait a minute. I think, didn't we agree to take written questions? I will answer questions as the university has directed me to do.
Why don't you start?
Sir, you said that the armed forces, upon capturing an objective, must take control of the communications. The enemy must not control it. Mr. Rockwell, you are the enemy of the B'nai B'rith, and you are engaged in war with them. If it was wrong for the Jews to control communications over an enemy like you, a person who could threaten their very... Or is it wrong for the Jews to control communications over an enemy like you, a person who could threaten their very existence?
My answer to that is this, ladies and gentlemen. I fight an open war. I ask, I beg, I plead with any representative of the B'nai B'rith, and they have a budget of $6 million against my $20,000 a year. I plead with any one of them to stand up to me before you people and let you people decide between us who is the enemy after you have heard all the issues. And this they will never do. I've offered my time at school after school to debate rather than to lecture, and I can never get anybody to stand up against what I have to say.
If we have been conquered, why have you been allowed to speak here?
We have one vestige of liberty left, and that is the Jews can't come out openly and say we're running this show. They have to run it as liberals. And they've been saying for years and years and years that everybody has to have academic freedom. And for all of my young adult life, I'm 46 now, and from the time I left Brown University until the last few years, the only academic freedom I ever saw was for communists. Communists at school after school after school lecturing. Finally, I decided, let's take advantage of this. If they claim there's academic freedom, they got to let me speak too, or else they'll have to admit that it's only communist freedom. So I have sneaked in under the door. That's the only reason that I get to talk in most cases, because they can't openly say it's only for communists. Academic freedom in the colleges has got to be for both sides, or you people will get wakened up.
What is your attitude toward Roman Catholicism?
This is a very interesting question, because I believe that just the opposite of what they're putting out now on the propaganda. I believe the only reason that Western Christian civilization survived the assault of Bolshevism in the 1920s and the 30s was because the Catholic Church backed Franco, the Catholic Church backed Mussolini, and Adolf Hitler. And between the Catholic Church and these three men, they stood the assault of Bolshevism. And if they hadn't, Spain today would be a Bolshevik country, as East Germany is and as Poland is. I think the Catholic Church is one of the great bulwarks, just as Lenin said. Lenin said the hardest thing for us to knock down is going to be the friars. And I agree. I am not a Catholic, but I respect the Catholic Church because I think for years it has been a bulwark against communism.
If a Jew is an atheist, what makes him a Jew?
Well, let the Jews answer that the best way I know. When Robert Soblin got pinched for being a communist, as I remember, he didn't run to Sweden, he ran to Israel. In fact, they weren't going to turn him loose either for a while there. It was quite a little struggle.
You say you want to help the Negroes go to Africa. Will you force them to go there? If not, what will you do with them?
No Negro will be forced to go to Africa. I believe in about 20 years ago, a man named Marcus Garvey got more than 4 million Negroes to petition to go back to Africa without any help whatsoever, nothing more nor less than just their transportation. 4 million of them signed up. I believe that we can get 20 million of them, or close to it, if we really offer them something. If we really prove to them that we sincerely mean to help them, I don't think it'll be any problem. However, Negroes are not going to mix in this country any more than Indians were allowed to after the Indian problem was solved. We're going to set up reservations. We are going to have a constitutional convention when I'm elected, and we will see to it that the amendment which tries to make Americans out of Negroes is repealed, and we will put the Negroes that want to stay here on reservations where they'll be guests of the state.
Didn't Hitler burn books?
I think Hitler did burn books, but as I've shown you, I disapprove of the book burning. I think people should be allowed to read any books. But I think that it's more evil and wicked to burn books by a sneaky method of threatening bookstores, which people don't know about, than it is to do it openly by burning books. I think it's both bad, but I think it's worse to do it by sneaking like they do in this country.
You say you find no faults with loyal religious Jews. Is it false that you have a Jewish altar cloth serving as a doormat in your Arlington headquarters?
Now, I would like to know if the man who wrote, well, I'm not going to answer it because under these circumstances here people all holler yes, but I'll bet you $5 million the man who wrote that never saw any such altar cloth, because we don't have it. I was going to say, has he ever been to the headquarters? I do not have a Jewish altar cloth serving as a doormat. This is juvenile and ridiculous. This is what you've been told in the Jewish papers. And if you believe that kind of stuff, I don't blame you for deciding the kind of thoughts that most of you have.
Sir, what's your real name?
By the way, well, let me, do you know there's actual right-wingers that are saying my name is Rockwell and I'm a Jewish plant? The Berkshires are saying that I'm working for Moscow. And a lot of the right-wingers are claiming that I am a plant that's supposed to be smearing them all as Nazis. So it's not such a silly question as it might seem. Some of the right-wingers are going along with that story.
Mr. Rockwell, would you please expound on your 10-year takeover plan of our government?
Well, I'm not averse to expounding any time. The program is not a 10-year program. It is a flexible program in 4 phases. The first phase was to become known. You cannot beat a political somebody with nobody. That's been proved over and over again. I learned that in Madison Avenue. If you made the greatest cigarette in the world, for instance, it was called Schmalz's cigarette, nobody would buy it. They'd still buy the ones they know. People vote for names and things they know. So the first thing you've got to do in politics is become known. I had no dough, no friends. I'm not like Mr. Welch. I didn't have a big bank account behind me, or Mr. Goldwater with a big department store. I was busted. And I had to become known, and I used dramatic methods. The swastika and the Nazi approach has made me known all over the world. Phase 2 is to begin to disabuse people of the false notions and the misconceptions that have been planted by the newspapers and by the lies in the managed press. That I'm doing right now. This is what we're doing all over the world today. My people are everywhere winning people over. Phase 3 is to take people that you won with the truth that you've spread and organize them into a political entity which is able to fight for power legally in the precincts, in the wards, and in the states and so forth. Phase 4 is to get elected to national power and clean the country up.
And this is the last question. Why, if you don't believe in book burning or the Aryan race theory or other facets of Hitler's philosophy, do you call yourself a Nazi?
I am a Nazi because above all and everything else, a National Socialist is a racist. I know that's a dirty word, but I believe that the white race created white Western Christian civilization, and without the white race there will be no ideal civilization and justice, and I mean to defend it and protect it. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You've been one of the most courteous audiences I've ever had. Thank you.